Hello bookworms! Today I'm going to be sharing my August wrap-up. It has been a long time since I've done a wrap-up. I think the last one that I did was in April, but I had a pretty exceptional reading month in August and I'm really excited to go over these books with you guys. I did film a couple of reading vlogs that are forthcoming. So ones where I did a reading vlog for them where you get like a full in-depth review there, which is usually spoiler free unless notated. So I'm going to kind of try to be brief on these, especially because there are a lot of them that I read. And then I also want to talk about 4 TV shows and 1 movie that I watched just to, keep you updated. I did read some short books, which is how I managed to read 18 books this month, but I also did read some long books. So there was a bit of a mix in there. Okay, but with everything that I have to cover, let's just go for it. So the last book in the month that I finished, but the first one that I want to talk about is Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb, which is the first book in the Live Ship Traders trilogy. I pretty much devoured this 900-page book. I finished it in a single week, which for me is really good, especially considering how dense Robin Hobb's writing is, but her stories are just so compelling that I cannot put it down. If you'll remember from my series video, my series I'm currently reading video, the one series that I mentioned that I want to read before the end of the year or want to start before the end of the year is Live Ship Traders, and I have now done that, so I feel very accomplished and very good about that. And I loved this one so much that I do foresee myself finishing the trilogy before the year ends. I actually kind of want to see if I could finish it next month, between October and November. I'm really excited to be back in the realm of the Elderlings. There are some really exceptional characters in this book, as per usual. I think my favorite human character is Althea, but I think overall my favorite character is Vivacia, which is actually the ship of Althea's family. A sentient ship just totally stole the show for me. And then there were some characters that I hated. So Kyle and Malta, both of them, it was torture having to spend time with them. Robin Hobb's writing is so good that it's one of those things where it's they're just so horrible. And though I keep trying to remind myself that Malta is a child and doesn't fully understand what it is that she is doing, but it's rough. It's rough going reading from them. I'm hoping that she'll mature more as the series goes on, but we'll see. And I hope Kyle dies a slow, painful death. If you are not the kind of person that enjoys seeing characters suffer intensely, then Robin Hobb is not for you. She definitely gets characters to their lowest point. She makes everything as bad as she possibly can, but having finished the Farseer trilogy, I feel there will be payoff and karma will come back around as I keep reading. So I'm enthralled. Next, I don't have a physical copy just yet, though I did order one. I read The Fall by Ryan Cahill. This is the first novella in the Bound and the Broken series. It's a prequel novella. It takes place 400 years before the events of Blood and Fire. I've already talked about this one in my series video as well, but I'll just reiterate here how much I loved it. If you have elves and dragons, I am likely going to enjoy your book, especially something that is high fantasy like this, and not to mention that Ryan Cahill's writing is exceptional. His storytelling completely impressed me in just 95 pages. I cannot wait to just catch up and just know everything that there is to know in this world. It's one of those series where I'm already hooked. It's been only 95 pages and I just foresee that this is going to be a favorite of mine. Then I read Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This one was excellent. I really loved this book. It totally took me by surprise. This is another one where I have promised you a full reading vlog for, and I am just about done editing it. So it's going to be for this and for Fourth Wing. And I do give a pretty in-depth review there. So I'm not going to really go into much here outside of telling you that I absolutely loved it. And then, as mentioned, I also read Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I fell in the middle on this one. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I thought it was entertaining. I don't think it was very good, but I don't think that it was terrible. I think it did what it set out to do, and I will read the next book. I was entertained enough that I will read the next book. Then I read A Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. I went into this one with really low expectations because I've heard pretty mixed reviews, and for the most part, the reviews have been on the negative side, but I ended up loving this one so much that it actually is turning out to be a new favorite for me. Just like Roshani's other books, the writing is exceptionally beautiful. It's very lyrical, very flowery, very descriptive, and it really just hooks me. This one just completely evokes the feeling of like a dark fairy tale, and it is absolutely what I would classify as a vibes book. If you're someone that likes a lot of plot, then you're not really gonna like this one. There's not a ton going on in the story. It's just that the beautiful writing kind of keeps you reading. Then I read The Only One Left by Riley Sager. This one is another one where I do have a reading vlog forthcoming. So again, don't want to go too far into it outside of telling you that I feel like Riley Sager totally made his comeback with this book. I hadn't really liked his last two books, but I'm so pleased to say that I loved this one. It's actually, I think it might be my favorite one to date. It took place in like a decrepit mansion on a giant cliff on the coast of Maine, and it was so atmospheric. The horror vibes were so strong, like really loved this one. And it follows a caregiver who is tasked with taking care of a woman who was accused of murdering her entire family, but there was never enough evidence to convict her for it. So people are unsure if it was her, but like everyone's pretty sure that it was. So her and the caregiver start getting a little bit closer. The caregiver figures out a way for them to communicate with each other, and then she starts learning more about what happened on that night. For this one, I do actually have to read one more book before I will be ready to post this one, so it will take a little longer, but it's a thriller, so it kind of works that you'll get it a bit closer to spooky season. Then I read The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. This one is also in that thriller reading vlog, and this one was also in my Dark Academia video as well. So just to give you a little quick review on this one, I really loved the setting. I thought it was really fun to be at Cambridge. I also really enjoyed the themes of the novel. It definitely explored obsession and just, you know, how messed up humanity is. I really like all of the nods to Greek mythology, the constant inclusion of Persephone. So there were things that I liked about it, but I really did not like the ending. So the ending kind of, I wouldn't say that it fully ruined the entire book for me. I did read it really fast. It was very easy to read, but it definitely was not one that I'm gonna keep, let's say that. Which is a shame because the cover is so pretty. Then I read The Winter of the Witch by Katherine Arden. I am so happy to say that I've finished this series now. This is the Winter Night trilogy, and I've been wanting to read this book for like at least a year and a half. So I'm glad that I finally did it. I actually buddy read this one with my friend Alexa from Alexa Loves Books. I very much enjoyed this conclusion. I do feel like it was the most magic and mythology heavy of the rest of the books in the series. So I do feel like there was a lot of payoff in this one, which was really nice. I also think Katherine Arden just writes beautifully. I'm so excited that she's coming out with a new book soon. However, I will say that The Girl in the Tower is still my favorite book in the series overall. So this, like, I wouldn't say it's like a new favorite for me, but I did very much enjoy it, and I am glad to have wrapped up Vasia's story. Then I read One Dark Window by Rachel Gellig. I actually also read this one with Alexa. This one actually really took me by surprise. I enjoyed it way more than I was expecting to. I actually liked it so much that I downloaded the e-arc of book 2, like, as soon as it was offered to me, and I've already started reading it. It's only a duology, which is also really nice, so if you're someone like me who likes reading books in a series close together because otherwise you'll just forget stuff, this is a really good time to pick this one up because the second book comes out in October, and it's also the perfect season to read it. In this, we are following a character named Elspeth who is working with a knight named Ravin. I think it's Ravin. It's either Ravin or Raven, but I've been saying Ravin in my mind, so that's what I'm gonna go with. And they have been working together to reunite this magical deck of cards in order to get rid of the mist that plagues their land. In their world, magic is illegal, it's been kind of outlawed, it's dangerous, and Ravin doesn't know that Elspeth is actually touched by magic, and she has something of a dark passenger that is residing within her consciousness. I thought the lore in this one was so cool. I really liked the idea of the deck of cards. I also really liked that this felt like an old school fantasy, like it has the knights, the swords, there's a lot of like wandering through the mist, wandering through the forest. It was really beautifully written, really atmospheric, and the prince is a jerk. do not like that guy. But yeah, really, really enjoyed this one. Then I read The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana, and I actually have the really pretty Fairy Loot edition of this one, but it is over on my romance shelves, and I'm trapped behind my filming setup. You can just imagine it here. This was a really fun, cozy, witchy romance novel. It actually felt to me a lot like the way that I felt reading The House in the Cerulean Sea. It was definitely one of those like feel-good kind of cozy fantasies. One thing that I will say is that this is a romance book, but I did feel like the romance was more of like a secondary plot line, and it did feel like the main focus was more of like the found family and the character getting involved with this household of entertaining characters and finally like kind of finding her place in the world. There was a romance too, and I did like it. I thought it was a good romance, but I just don't think that it was like the focus. But yeah, read this one really quick. It was very delightful, and also it's another really fun one to pick up in October. Then I read Mysteries of Thorn Manor by Margaret Rogerson. This is the smallest book ever. It's so short and little and sweet. That's what we'll say. It's short and sweet. So speaking of cozy fantasy, this one was also a lot of fun. I was really glad to revisit the characters in Sorcery of Thorns. I really love them. In this one, we have Silas comes back, which is so exciting because Silas is the best. But I will say that this book was essentially the equivalent of like the beach episode in an anime. It was definitely like pretty plot light. We are just following the characters in Thorn Manor. There's some crazy stuff going on, and they're also getting ready and preparing to host a midwinter ball. So it was really just fun. Like, it wasn't anything that was high stakes. It was just like cozy and fun. I think this is a really great read, especially for winter. Then I read A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. Sad to say it, but this one just didn't do it for me. Outside of the main character having a very cool job, she's an anthro-entomologist, which is essentially like an archaeologist that specializes in bugs. There wasn't a lot about this one that appealed to me. I felt like the beginning was on the slower side. It took a little bit to kind of draw me in, but after a dig that she's planning on going on, it gets canceled. She ends up moving back in with her mom into her childhood home, which is the home that was also her mom's childhood home, and finds out that the house is kind of weird. There's some strange things that are happening, but obviously our main character thinks that there must be a rational explanation for everything. Surely it's not a haunted house. And her mom seems very nervous, very uncomfortable, and just very different and weird, and she's like not really sure what's going on with her. I think part of the reason why I struggled with this one is because some of the haunting stuff was like a little bit gruesome for me. I really am not a fan of bugs. I do not like when they're in my house, so reading about bugs in someone else's house was just not it for me. Then I read The Jade Setter of Janloon by Fonda Lee. This is a prequel short story that follows a character who is a jade jeweler within the world of Kekken. This is another one that I had a really great time with, so there's a little bit of a mystery that ensues when an important piece goes missing from the safe of the jeweler's shop. Our main character is not the owner, but he's like basically next in line to take over the business, and he has to kind of figure out what's going on, and it's pretty wild. Then the smallest book that I read this year is Galatea by Madeline Miller. If you can't tell, I was like, I should try to read some of the shortest books on my TBR just so that I can get my physical TBR to be lower. So that's why I have some novellas in this list. Usually I wouldn't read as many in a month, but I had a really good day, like just reading a bunch of them, and I want to go back to that day. But I don't have much to say about this one because it was only like 40 pages. But I did love that Miller gave a voice to Galatea. I really liked the way that this one ended, and I thought it was a pretty interesting concept for a story. I think it's worth reading, but it's maybe not worth owning. Then I reread Empire of Storms by Sarah J. Maas. So I'm doing a full Sarah J. Maas reread this year. I want to read everything she's ever written and then finally read the second Crescent City book and ideally be caught up in time for the release of House of Flame and Shadow in January, because it does sound like some of the series are going to be converging based on the cover of the third book. I haven't read any of the analyses of it because they probably will spoil things, but just me personally looking at it, I was able to kind of put some things together. And yeah, now I feel like really good about this reread. So far, Empire of Storms is still my least favorite book in the Throne of Glass series. We'll see if Tower of Dawn changes that, because that's next. The one thing that I will praise it for is any scene with Manon. I will read any Manon scene. She is just the best character in this series for me. I love her so much. I kind of want to after I finish everything, even go back again and just like reread all of the Manon parts in every book. And then lastly, for books, I read volumes 8, 9, and 10 of Full Metal Alchemist. So I'm still very slowly making my way through the series. I am now actually just making it a goal to finish it by the end of the year. I do tend to prioritize novels over manga. So as quick as these are to read, I never grab for them. I'm usually like, oh, but I want to read another chapter in the book that I'm currently reading. Slow but steady. So I really loved volumes 8 and 9, but volume 10 was a little bit more war heavy than I prefer. It was interesting to get more flashbacks and to find out more about the war with the Ishvalans, but it really just wasn't like my cup of tea. However, I am excited to continue reading and see where the series goes from here. So moving on to TV and movies, just so that you guys know, the way that I count TV and movies in my year is, well, obviously a movie is easy. Like, I watched this movie in this month, so there it is. But when it comes to TV shows, I don't count it as watched until I've completed like a full season, and if I finish the full season next month, then I would count it as like a September watch. So anyway, starting off, the first show I want to talk about is Star Trek Strange New Worlds. This show is just incredible. It is the most Star Trek show since Voyager. There was a musical episode this season that was just like brilliant, and I think it's really clear that Strange New Worlds is created by people who are Star Trek fans. Like, the people that are putting this out love Star Trek, and that just shines through in every single episode. And it's so gratifying for someone who has watched like everything that there is. It just means so much to me that like this new series is like going back to Star Trek's roots. And I think it's a really great starting point for new fans who are looking to get invested in it. I think that Captain Pike is amazing. Absolutely love him. And then we also get familiar faces from Star Trek, the original series. So just like all around this, oh, and we also got a Lower Decks crossover episode this season, which was so good. Like, that was the episode that Andrew and I were waiting for, and it delivered. Actually, one of my favorite jokes from this whole series was in that episode, so I won't spoil what it is in case you want to watch it, but I am really sad that this season is over. Next up, I'll talk about Rings of Power. So we finally finished watching Rings of Power. We took a really long break. I think we watched through episode 4 last year when it came out, and then put it on pause and finally just picked it back up the other day. I didn't love it. There were things that I did like about it. I obviously really liked all of like the scenery and the landscape. I do think that it is really pretty, really beautifully shot. I think that there are too many characters. I think they're trying to do too much and they're just not doing it well. I think that some of the storylines are kind of boring, and I like the scenes with like Elrond and Durin. I thought that was fun, but then they're also like kind of changing some things, and I don't like that. I think it's lacking the heart that's in Lord of the Rings, and it's kind of like relying on the fact that they just like expect people to like it because it is Lord of the Rings, or Lord of the Rings adjacent. There was a very cool scene in the second to last episode, and I liked that. I thought that was interesting. But again, overall, I just didn't love this one. I will continue watching it because it's Lord of the Rings adjacent, but it's not something that I would consider a favorite. Then we watched What We Do in the Shadows. I was so glad that the show came back. I just have so much fun with these characters. Incredibly entertaining if you haven't watched it. It follows a group of vampires who live together in this house in Staten Island, and they're obviously like super old and they're very out of touch with modern society. They don't really know what they're doing, but they like think that they know things very well because they've been alive for so long. So it's very, very entertaining. There's lots of hijinks, lots of shenanigans. I think my favorite thing this season was Nandor getting interviewed by the local news anchor and her interpretation of his name. That was so funny. There were also some like very weird plot lines with the experiments that Laszlo did with Guillermo's DNA. Didn't love that, but overall it's always fun. And then fourth, we watched the first season of the originals. So we started watching the originals, and then Netflix was like, the last day to watch this is September 7th or something, and I was like, cool. So we just watched the first season because I was like, I don't want to start watching the next season and then have it disappear and not show up on any other streaming platform. So once it does show up somewhere else, I will pick it back up, but decided to pause for now. I really love Rebecca. I really love Elijah. And one thing that I will say is that the pacing was really weird in this one. It kind of felt like the main story arc wrapped up almost like in the middle of the season, but then like the show just kept going and it was like, why is it still going? Like we have a resolution on this thing. Obviously there were like new things that popped up, but it just felt like the like exciting thing that we were building toward had already ended. Anyway, can't escape those Michelsons. And then the last thing I want to talk about is a movie, and that is Dune. Andrew and I finally watched Dune. I really enjoyed it, and I think it was really obvious how much Star Wars pulled inspiration from Dune. I think like there were a lot of direct parallels in Dune and in A New Hope, which was really interesting. Like I had always known that that was a thing, but it was like very evident. And it's kind of funny because obviously like this Dune movie is coming later, but Dune, the book, was obviously written first. So seeing them out of order, like you have to remind yourself like, no, like this came first. So that was like something I had to keep in the back of my mind. This one had a truly star-studded cast. Like the casting was really outstanding, and I think everyone did a really great job in their roles. The movie also got me really excited to read the novel. My one gripe, I would say, with the movie is that, or two gripes rather. The first one was that obviously it's like Dune Part 1, so it's not the full story. The movie just kind of ends. Like on the one hand, I'm obviously glad that they did that because then that means that they're adapting the full story of the book instead of rushing things. So I think that is a good thing, but as someone who was just watching it as a movie for the first time, it wasn't the most exciting way to end the story. And number two, having not read the book, there were a couple of things that I found to be a little bit hard to follow. And it was really funny because Andrew thought that I had read the book already. So we were watching it and he kept asking me questions and I was like, I don't know. And then finally he was like, didn't you read this? And I was like, no, I'm just as lost as you are. I think like part of that was because there was some low, like a whispering and mumbling, and it was hard to make out what some characters were saying at points. Like we even toyed with the idea of putting subtitles on. We ended up not doing it, but maybe we should have. But either way, I'm really excited to read the book, and I think that watching the movie first was good for me because now I'll like be able to visualize the world that I saw in the movie. Okay, so that's my wrap up. That is everything that I read and everything that I watched and feel like talking about in the month of August. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. Let me know some of your favorite books that you read this month, some of your least favorite books that you read this month, and your favorite and least favorite things that you watched. So that's all that I have for this video, and I will see you guys soon in a new one. Bye!